This image really took my breath away when I saw it. It's a human being captured in the wilderness as if they were a wild animal, or a cryptid captured on a trail cam. But who are they? Why are they there? And what happened next? The trail cam images captured on August 22nd, 2021 were approximately 9 months before a disturbing discovery. The footage shows a white female during the dead of night. She initially appears at 1:33 AM, barely visible on the right side of the screen. She then reappears between 4:30 and 4:31 AM. She's moving slowly with a noticeable limp and using a large stick to help her walk. In all images, she is wearing only a bra and some muddy leggings. Fast forward to May 2022, a land survey behind the National Guard Armory in Wadesboro, North Carolina, led to a grim discovery. It was the skeletal remains of an unidentified female. The skeleton was mostly intact, with clothing remnants still present. This included a black Secret Treasures bra, size 34C, and deteriorated tights or leggings. Due to the condition of the clothing, further details such as size or colours couldn't really be determined. So that gives us around 9 months between the trail cam footage and the discovery of the remains. How long did the woman remain alive? Exactly how was she surviving? What was the woman doing during that time? Why was she out there alone with so little? And how long had she been there before she was found? Investigators have explored possible links between the unidentified woman and missing persons cases from the area. One such case is that of April Michelle Reed, a woman who has been missing since March 2021. But despite physical similarities, dental records have ruled her out as a match. Another potential connection is with Amber Ray Johnston, a woman who disappeared in August 2021 whilst travelling to Myrtle Beach. Her last known location was in the Charlotte area, approximately 54 miles from Wadesboro, but as of now, no definitive link has been established. The lack of public information has led to frustration and, of course, speculation, and I can see why. This is absolutely bizarre. The Anson County Sheriff's Office has released limited statements citing the ongoing nature of the case. However, they urge anyone with information to come forward to help bring closure to this mystery. How do you think this woman ended up alone in the middle of the night, with nothing but the clothing she had on and a stick to help her walk? Something about this makes me feel really uneasy. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary school trip. A group of teenagers posing together, smiling for the camera. But just hours after this photo was taken, almost every student in it was gone. This is one of the last known images of the students aboard MV Sewol, a ferry travelling from Incheon to Jeju Island on April 16, 2014. On board, there were 476 passengers, among them 325 students from Danwon High School. This was all supposed to be a fun trip, but the ferry never reached its destination, and by the end of the day, 304 people were no longer alive, and most of them were people just like those in this photo. They were trapped inside the ship as it sank, and maybe the most disturbing part, this was all completely preventable. On April 16, 2014, at 8:48 AM, the MV Sewol suddenly tilted. A photo from a student's phone shows belongings sliding across the floor, but at the time, no one thought much of it. Passengers were, after all, told to stay where they were, as the crew insisted that the situation was under control. But behind the scenes, water was already rushing into the lower decks. At 9:30 AM, the ship tilted so far that passengers couldn't stand up straight any longer. Some students filmed videos, laughing nervously, but ultimately they believed they were safe. However, others began to panic as the ship continued to roll to its side. One sad image shows students huddled together in their cabin, waiting for further instructions. However, those instructions were not going to come, and the reason is absolutely infuriating. You see, the students were not going to get any help at all from the ferry's crew, because outside, the crew had already begun escaping. But the students, many of them trusting of authority, remained inside. Just minutes later, the entire ship was nearly completely submerged. Everyone that stayed in their cabins as they were told never stood a chance. As the ferry tilted further, those trapped inside began sending their final messages to loved ones. Some students sent text messages to their parents hoping for reassurance. One read, "Mom, don't worry, we're staying put like they told us. They said help is coming." Others began to realize the terrible truth. "I'm scared. If I don't make it, please remember me. Tell Dad I love him." At 10:17 a.m., the ship made its final distress call. But by 10:31 a.m., MV Sewol disappeared completely beneath the waves. Rescue boats arrived, but it was already too late. Survivors recall watching helplessly as classmates disappeared beneath the water. Among the 476 people on board, only 172 survived. Videos recorded by those still on board showed their final moments, some crying, others still laughing, unaware that they wouldn't make it out. It's that invincibility of youth. I dare say that at that age, I would have been right there, laughing with them. The footage in context is almost too painful to watch. As news of the sinking ship spread, devastated parents gathered at the port, all of them hoping for their family members' safe return. But soon their hope turned to rage. Investigations revealed even more horrifying failures. The ferry was dangerously overloaded. This made it unstable from the start. As we know, the captain abandoned the ship first, leaving hundreds of people trapped inside. He told the passengers to stay put, even when escape was impossible, and then saved himself with no further instruction. None of this should have happened. A now infamous image showed South Korea covered in yellow ribbons, a symbol of national mourning for the lives that were lost. In the empty classrooms of Danwon High School, students' desks remained untouched, covered in flowers, letters, and photos. Justice was demanded, but it's hard to think of a suitable punishment for all of this pain. However, the captain was sentenced to life in prison for murder. South Korea's president even publicly apologized. But for the victims' families, no punishment could bring their loved ones back. South Korea, and now we too, will never forget the faces in those photos and videos. A young couple sets off on a cross-country road trip, excited for their new life on the East Coast. Before hitting the road, a friend takes this photograph. It captures a special moment and the dawn of a new and exciting life for the pair. Terry Pettit and Ronald Yakimchuk were from Edmonton, Alberta. They met through their involvement with the University of Alberta's student newspaper. Ronald, otherwise known as Ron, served as the editor, while Terry contributed as a writer. Terry was just 18 when she met 23-year-old Ron, and their relationship led to marriage on July 25, 1971, in a ceremony officiated by the university chaplain. Ron stood 6 feet tall and weighed 150 pounds, and he chose to wear a traditional Ukrainian embroidered shirt with a black vest. Terry walked down the aisle in a white ankle-length dress, holding a bouquet of yellow roses. She had hoped to have the theme tune from MASH playing as she walked down the aisle, but the chaplain refused to allow it. In June 1973, the adventurous couple embarked on a life-changing trip. Their plan: drive across Canada, attend a friend's wedding in Montreal, and then start a new life on the East Coast, where Ron had a teaching job already lined up. And the car they were going to do it all in was a 1959 Volkswagen Beetle. It was a faded red with a green hood and fender. It also had a 6-foot white kayak strapped to the roof. So all of this made a vehicle so distinctive that it really would have been impossible to miss. Their friends joked that the car wouldn't make the journey. In fact, they bet on it. As Ron and Terry made their way across Ontario, they stopped in a town of Dryden. On June 12, 1973, Terry wrote a postcard home. She told her friend that everything was going smoothly in her trademark funny way. The one-word message, Nya, spelled N-Y-A-H on the postcard, was a playful way of Terry saying "I told you so," that their car had made it that far, contrary to what the friends had been saying. Terry had a habit of using the taunt, "Nya nya," and the postcard was her way of signalling that she had won the bet. But this postcard would be the last proof of their existence. And it also meant that at that time in Dryden, Ontario, they were still okay. But this is where things take a dark turn. The couple never made it to the wedding, and they never arrived at their destination either. Ron never started his teaching job, and it seems there was no happily ever after. Somewhere between Dryden and Montreal, Terry and Ron, their entire distinctive vehicle, and all of their belongings just vanished without a trace. So after June the 12th, 1973, Terry Pettit and Ronald Yakimchuk were just gone. At first, their families weren't too worried. They were on a long road trip after all. And this was the 1970s, so just dropping a text message wasn't a thing. Perhaps they would call or send a letter when they got a chance. However, when they failed to arrive at the wedding in Montreal, everyone got the feeling that something actually wasn't right. Their loved ones then contacted authorities, and an investigation was launched. What the police found was literally nothing. Their bank accounts were never touched. Ron's life insurance policy remained unclaimed, and no one reported seeing their distinctive car on the highways after Dryden. This wasn't just a case of two people going missing. It was more a case of a total vanishing. It was as if Terry and Ron had been erased from existence. It's hard to imagine going from this picture to just being nothing at all. With no leads and no physical evidence, investigators were left asking the same question that haunts this case today. What happened? One of the most common theories is that Terry and Ron accidentally drove off the road, and they possibly ended up in a lake, river, or dense forest. Many highways in Ontario are surrounded by deep bodies of water and thick trees. A crashed car could easily remain hidden for decades, or indeed forever. However, there was no solid evidence that this was the case. Another theory is that perhaps someone could have harmed them. Hitchhikers, truckers, or anyone else with criminal intent may have crossed their path. Their unusual car could have made them an easy target. They were standing out. If this was the case, someone may have hidden or destroyed the car, the couple, and all their belongings. There is, of course, always the option that this was always their plan. Some believe that Terry and Ron wanted to start a new life, and indeed there's evidence that they did. But the life that they told everyone about was simply just a ruse, and that they instead disappeared on purpose. But if that's the case, why leave behind the money in their bank accounts? Why not claim their life insurance? And why not tell anyone? It's strongly believed that they had no known serious troubles that would have made them flee, so this doesn't really make sense. Decades later, the mystery of Terry and Ron remains unsolved. What really happened after they sent that last postcard? 50 years later, their families, and now us, are still waiting for answers. Friends hanging out in a food court. There are millions of pictures like this online, but this image in particular has one major difference. Just a few seconds later, everything would change dramatically. A regular evening at the Real Plaza Trujillo Mall turned into a nightmare when the food court's roof suddenly collapsed. Disaster struck on February 21st, 2025 at approximately 8:40 p.m. It happened while hundreds of people were still inside. At least 6 people lost their lives, and 78 others were injured. The collapse didn't just affect the food court, it also damaged a nearby children's play area, making this whole thing even more tragic. Panic erupted as shoppers screamed and ran for safety, while others were helplessly trapped beneath the debris, waiting for rescue. But what could have caused this unexpected disaster? Survivors recall hearing a loud cracking noise moments before the collapse. Some managed to escape in time, but many others were caught with no escape. One witness described the moment. "I was eating with my family when suddenly the ceiling started falling. People ran, but many couldn't make it out." As we would expect, much of this was captured on video. You can hear shoppers screaming and running in terror, and we see thick dust filling the air as the ceiling caved in. Emergency workers pulled victims from the rubble, many just using their bare hands. However, several challenges delayed their response. There was a lack of specialised rescue equipment, so workers had to rely on basic tools. There was also poor lighting in the collapsed area, and this slowed down search efforts. The crowd of panicked shoppers too made it difficult for the first responders to navigate the scene. This was a hectic and desperate disaster. Hospitals in the area were quickly overwhelmed due to the large number of casualties. Meanwhile, Real Plaza management announced the closure of all their shopping centres nationwide as a sign of mourning. But as rescue efforts continued, questions obviously arose about what could cause this tragedy. How could a ceiling just collapse in this way? Heavy rain was trapped and collecting on the roof. This, along with poor building maintenance, seems to be the best answers for what happened right now. Former employees have reported leaks in the food court ceiling, and they say that they were never properly addressed. A former worker revealed, "We've reported leaks in the roof several times, but management never took it seriously. And if this is true, it would be a grave mistake." At first glance, this looks like a normal photograph of an explorer posing inside a cave. But within just hours of this image being taken, the man, Floyd Collins, would be trapped alive in that cave for 17 days. In January 1925, Collins, a seasoned cave explorer, ventured into Sand Cave in Kentucky. He was hoping to discover a new entrance to Mammoth Cave, one that he actually planned to turn into a tourist attraction. But on January the 30th, 1925, as he crawled through a narrow passage, a rock the size of a grand piano shifted. It pinned his left leg beneath it. Floyd wasn't seriously injured, he simply couldn't move. Rescue didn't seem impossible at first, but what started as a desperate attempt to free a trapped man quickly turned into one of the greatest media spectacles of the early 20th century. The photo of Floyd Collins before he was trapped remains a chilling reminder of how quickly things can go very, very wrong in situations that may otherwise seem pretty normal. By January the 31st, the first rescuer crawled into the cave. Floyd was still alive. His voice was calm but weak. For days, volunteers passed him food, water and blankets. A single oil lamp was placed nearby, providing him with a tiny flickering source of light. A haunting photograph captures a scene at the cave entrance. Hundreds of men digging, reporters swarming the area, and curious onlookers turning the tragedy into pure spectacle. The first real attempt to free him by simply pulling at his leg failed. The rock wouldn't budge. But then, further disaster struck. As rescuers dug to widen the passage, a landslide sealed off the entrance. This left Floyd completely trapped beneath the earth. What had started as a rescue operation was now a slow-moving death sentence. For days, rescuers frantically tried to reach Floyd, but by February the 4th, 1925, the situation had grown hopeless. A landslide had cut off his air supply, and now no one could reach him. Amazingly, he was still alive, but he was weakening fast. The last known photo of the rescue effort shows men staring into the hole. They were calling Floyd's name, but now the cave was silent. Inside, Floyd had most likely lost consciousness, his body unable to fight back against the cold, dehydration and exhaustion. On February the 13th, 1925, rescuers finally broke through the rock to reach him, but it was all too late. After 17 days underground, Floyd Collins' time on this earth was now at an end. His lifeless body lay exactly where it had for weeks, one arm frozen in place as if still trying to dig himself free. Obviously, his body was still stuck, and removing him would be far too dangerous. For now, Floyd would remain buried inside Sand Cave, his body left in situ. But the most bizarre and disturbing part of this story was still to come. Floyd's family desperately wanted to give him a proper burial, but as we know, the cave was too unstable to remove him safely. So instead of retrieving him, authorities sealed off the cave entrance, leaving Floyd's body inside. It wouldn't be until years later that his body was finally removed, but this was not to be buried. Instead, Floyd's remains were placed inside a glass-topped coffin. This would be put on public display in Crystal Cave, where tourists paid money to view his remains. And for years his body lay there, a gruesome attraction for bizarre visitors. Then in 1929, his body was stolen. Grave robbers dragged him from the coffin, only to dump his remains in a nearby field. Eventually, his body was found, and he could now be reburied as the family had originally wanted. To this day, visitors still leave flowers at his grave, but his ghost is said to still haunt the cave where he spent his final days.